Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevon Stewart. I am the Director of Ontario and Atlantic Canada with the United Steelworkers Union. I want to thank everyone for being here today to discuss this critical issue facing Canadian workers. I'd also like to thank NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh for joining us today. Together, we stand united in our commitment to protecting workers across Canada. Today, we're here to talk about the steel industry, a true pillar of Canadians' economy. Steel is an industry that supports thousands of good-paying union jobs and sustains entire communities from coast to coast. Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, Regina, Edmonton, Selkirk, these are just a few communities where steelworkers have built strong, resilient economies and where they settled with their families. The work that happens in these communities is more than just a job. It's a livelihood for workers, their families, and their entire communities. But the steel industry is under threat. Last week, President Trump, took another dangerous step that escalates the trade conflict between the US and Canada by signing an executive order imposing a 25% tariff on all US imports of steel and aluminum, including Canada, effective March 12th. These tariffs will stack on top of the 25% tariff already in place on all Canadian exports, which were temporarily delayed for 30 days. Let's be clear. This has nothing to do with fair trade. It's about politics, and Canadian workers and industries like the steel sector will be impacted. When steel workers lose their jobs, their families, their communities all feel the pain. This 30-day reprieve is clearly not a long-term solution. The threats remain, and they're adding up. We can't afford to stand idly by while President Trump uses these tariffs to hurt workers. We need to fight back and get ready for the worst-case scenario. This is negotiations. As steelworkers unions, we know a thing or two about negotiations. We face tough bosses, even bullies. We know that sometimes we have to make tough decisions, like striking to protect our interests. We know that a strike is painful short-term, but it's good for the long-term. Right now, the government is negotiating with a bully, and we're here to tell them that as long as workers remain at the center of their decision, we will support them. But we need action now. Our governments must act now to secure protections for steelworkers and all Canadian workers likely to be impacted, as well as industries they support. We need a comprehensive response. And a good way to start would be required that all publicly funded projects use Canadian steel, aluminum, and other materials. Canadian taxpayers' money must be used to support Canadian jobs, and period. We're also asking the government to implement immediate measures to protect workers who could be affected by this trade war, starting with improving the work share program to ensure workers remain employed. But the steel industry, United Steelworkers will continue to fight for these jobs, and we will not back down. We will stand with our allies and push policies to protect our workers and their communities from these reckless tariffs. It is now my privilege to introduce Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, who has been a strong voice for the workers and a true ally in this fight.
Thanks so much, Kevon. Appreciate it. Kevon, District 6. The work represent the folks that build the steel in our country. We have some of the best workers in the world, if not the best workers in the world when it comes to steel. We make some of the best, if not the best steel in the world. We're in Hamilton right now, and this is a steel town. So these are the workers that are impacted by these tariffs. These are workers that are already feeling the impacts. But like Canadians, these workers are defiant. Canadians made a decision. We're seeing it across the country. People are saying, we're not going to buy American. We're going to boycott American. We're going to buy Canadian. Canadians are proud of their country, and they want to fight back, just like these workers. They want to fight back. So let's support these workers in fighting back. My plan as Prime Minister is to ensure when we build infrastructure in this country, We got to build, but let's build using 100% Canadian steel. Let's put these workers to work. These workers want to work, and they make some of the best steel in the world, so let's use that for all the projects. So we want a massive infrastructure build where we are building the hospitals, the roads, the public infrastructure, the public transport using Canadian steel and Canadian workers. Let's turn inwards to ensure that we are building the country that we need with Canadian workers and Canadian steel. In addition, as Prime Minister, we got to make sure that we're here for workers whenever there's ups and downs. We got to be there for them. So I want to enhance EI. That includes looking at better work share and better supports for workers. If ever it's needed, EI should be there for you. But we got to start first by building our country up and making sure we use Canadian steel and Canadian workers to do that. But we know when there's conflict, when there's uncertainty, when there's unpredictability, there's different approaches. We know for the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, anytime he's confronted with a challenge like this, his solution is the same. Cut jobs, cut services that people need, and that's going to cost you and your family. That's the Conservative way. That's what they're proposing. And why? Well, they want to cut from you and your family to give to their billionaire buddies. That's what Conservatives do. I'm surprised, though, that Mark Carney is now sounding really similar. He's saying some of the same things. He's saying he wants to cut public sector jobs, he wants to cut services, and he wants to give a big tax giveaway to his millionaire CEO buddies. It's no wonder that Stephen Harper, the former Conservative Prime Minister of Canada, wanted Mark Carney to be his finance minister, because clearly they see eye to eye, cutting services, cutting jobs, cutting public sector workers to give to their millionaire, billionaire CEO buddies. New Democrats reject that approach. We want to invest in our own country. We want to build up our country. We want to support workers. And to do that, we need to build Canadian with Canadian steel and Canadian workers, and we can do that. We're going to fight back by supporting our workers in our own country. That's what New Democrats are proposing to do today. Donc, je suis tellement honoré d'être ici à Hamilton avec le directeur de District 6, Kevon Stewart, aussi avec des métallos arrière moi. Ce sont les chefs de leur mouvement syndical, ce sont les présidents de leur syndicat local, et je suis fier d'être ici avec eux. On est dans une ville, la ville de Hamilton, une ville avec beaucoup de travailleurs métallos, des travailleurs qui produisent l'acier canadien. Donc, ils sont les travailleurs impactés par les tarifs. Et ils ont peur. Ils ont des inquiétudes. Mais en même temps, ils sont défiants. Comme le reste des Canadiens qui sont défiants, qui disent non, on n'accepte pas l'intimidation de Donald Trump. Ce sont les travailleurs qui disent la même chose. On n'accepte pas l'intimidation de Donald Trump. On est prêt de se battre pour notre pays. Donc, on a besoin d'un gouvernement qui se bat pour les travailleurs. Donc, ça, c'est pourquoi aujourd'hui, je propose, comme Premier ministre, que je vais investir, que je vais encourager davantage de produits, de construire les infrastructures qu'on a besoin ici dans notre pays avec les travailleurs canadiens, avec l'acier canadien. 100% d'acier canadien doit être dans l'infrastructure canadienne où on a une implication fédérale. On doit avoir 100% l'acier canadien pour encourager ces travailleurs, pour aider ces travailleurs et pour bâtir un pays plus résilient. En même temps, les travailleurs doivent savoir que s'il y a un temps difficile, que le gouvernement sera là pour eux. Et ça, c'est pourquoi, comme Premier ministre, je m'engage aussi d'améliorer l'assurance emploi pour que ce programme sera là pour les gens quand les gens ont besoin, si jamais ils ont besoin. Mais dans ces temps difficiles, on a des approches différentes. Et pour les conservateurs, et Pierre Poilievre l'a déjà dit, son approche dans cette situation difficile, c'est de couper dans les services dont vous avez besoin et couper les emplois pour donner des gros cadeaux aux riches PDG. C'est ce que les conservateurs font tout le temps. Je suis surpris un peu que Mark Carney a commencé à dire la même chose. Il a aussi proposé de couper les emplois, couper les services dont vous avez besoin pour donner des cadeaux aux riches PDG. Mais ce n'est pas surprenant parce que il était le choix d'ancien Premier ministre Stephen Harper, l'ancien Premier ministre conservateur. Elle a voulu que Mark Carney devienne son ministre des Finances parce qu'il partage les mêmes valeurs, les valeurs de couper les services dont vous avez besoin et donner des cadeaux aux riches PDG. On rejette cette approche. L'NPD rejette cette approche. On veut bâtir un pays plus résilient. Ça veut dire encourager et appuyer les travailleurs canadiens avec l'acier 100% canadien. Merci. Thank you. I'm ready for any questions you might have.
We'll start with questions in the room, starting with CHCH.
Hello, Kelly Botello, CHCH News. My question is for Mr. Stewart. Hamilton is a steel town. As you know, these tariffs are extremely top of mind to everyone in this city. You're throwing your support behind Jagmeet Singh. What is it that he's promised you and your union specifically that you think is worth throwing your support behind him?
Thank you for the question. It's not a matter of Jagmeet promising the steelworkers anything. What we see is Jagmeet's willing to stand up for workers. And the workers in Hamilton need somebody to look up to and somebody who's going to fight for their backs. Right now, the tariffs are coming. The question is, we don't know what the government is going to do right now. You hear Jagmeet out in the public speaking of what he's willing to do and what he's willing to stand up for. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a government that's willing to fight for us.
And my next question is for Mr. Singh. If elected the next Prime Minister of Canada, you'll be dealing with the Trump administration and, of course, these looming tariffs. How would you deal with President Trump? What are your tactics that you think would be effective for someone like him?
All right, there's a two-part to this. First of all, we're dealing with someone who's a bully. And bullies only understand one thing, that is strength. And Hamilton knows something about being in a fight. Hamilton's a scrappy town. They know what it's like. You got to fight back. That's for sure. But we can't control what he's going to do. We got to fight back. We got to defend our country. But we also have to look at what we can do for our country. And that's why I'm saying if we're going to use our federal government to build projects, let's massively build projects using 100% Canadian steel. Why are we using other steel for projects in our country when we can build it here in our country? We can put Canadian workers to work. That's what I'm proposing today. If we're going to build hospitals, roads, bridges, and we need to, if we're going to build public transport, if we're going to build massive infrastructure projects, let's use 100% Canadian steel. Let's ensure that these workers have jobs in Canada supported by a government that puts workers first. That's our vision. We can't control what Trump's going to do. We can fight back, and we absolutely are ready to do that. But we got to be defiant in building up a country that we are proud of. And to do that, let's build Canadian, buy Canadian, support Canadian workers.
And Jagmeet, do you know right now how much steel in Canada is not Canadian steel that's being currently used?
Well, there's actually no requirement right now. When there are projects being built with taxpayer dollars, there's no real requirement that ensures that it's going to be all Canadian content. Many projects we see federal money going to foreign countries, foreign companies. We're not actually seeing a strong requirement that if we're building a bridge, if we're building roads, if we're building infrastructure, that all that content is Canadian. That's not something that any other party is proposing. We're saying let's use 100% Canadian steel in every project. Let's make that a requirement. If we're going to work with provinces to build projects, which we absolutely should, let's encourage them to also have a requirement that every piece, every part of steel that's used is 100% Canadian. Imagine the type of economy we could build if we were using Canadian steel and Canadian workers to build our country. Imagine the type of country we could build together. That's what I'm envisioning, where we are using the power of our country to build a better country.
Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions sur Zoom. We will now take questions on Zoom. One question, one follow-up. We will start with David Baxter with the CP. Please go ahead.
Hey there, Mr. Singh, can you hear me?
Yes, David.
All right, perfect. All right, talking about building things like hospitals, roads, bridges. One thing I haven't heard you mention that uses a lot of steel is pipelines. That there's lots of talk about with the tariff threat. Does Canada relook at the case for an east-to-west pipeline for something like natural gas? What would the NDP do on that front?
Well, we absolutely need to build infrastructure east-west. And what I'm proposing is an east-west energy grid. We've got incredible supplies of low-cost, cheap electricity that's clean electricity, but we're not connected between the provinces. Imagine the climate we could create, the business climate, the manufacturing climate we could create across the country if we connected the cheap, low cost, cheap, clean electricity from jurisdictions like Manitoba, like BC and Quebec, and connected that across the country. Imagine the amount of jobs we could create. We built an east-west energy grid that connected our country. That's a project that would put steel workers to work, electricians to work, a host of jobs, and it would build up a more resilient country. We've heard, and I went to Germany, spoke with the German government. They want our energy. They want clean energy. So let's build clean energy in our country. That's a massive infrastructure project. That's lots of steel. That's lots of jobs. And that stays in our country. That builds up our country.
So is that a no to the idea of an NDP government approving an east-west pipeline?
No, that's just my priority. My priority is we need a big, massive public infrastructure project, and I'd like to see an east-west energy grid. But when it comes to public projects around energy, we have a couple of criteria that we look at. These are important criteria. We want to make sure, one, it's something that the community wants in their community, so social acceptability. We want to make sure that it's a project that actually benefits workers. So we want to see a clear plan that creates jobs in communities that benefits Canadian workers. We want to make sure that we meet our environmental requirements, so we're not damaging or hurting the environment. And finally, we want to make sure we work with Indigenous communities to make these projects happen. But yeah, we're open to projects if they meet those criteria. The project that I'm really focused on and excited about is an east-west energy grid, but we're open to other projects as well.
Nous allons maintenant à Émilie Bergeron avec la presse canadienne. C'est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh, vous m'entendez?
Oui, bonjour.
Oui, donc, les intentions de vote, dans les sondages sur les intentions de vote, le NPD fait face à une baisse. Vous avez déjà dit que selon vous, c'est normal que le Parti libéral, il y a des gens qui s'intéressent au Parti libéral puisqu'il y a une course à la direction, mais la course à la direction va prendre fin et on pourrait se retrouver en élection tout de suite au lendemain, là, ou presque. Alors, comment vous expliquez cette baisse? Comment vous allez y faire face?
On va parler avec les gens et demander une question simple. Est-ce que votre vie est meilleure ou pire après 9 ans des gouvernements libéraux? Parce qu'ils ont eu 9 ans. Est-ce que c'est plus cher ou moins cher d'acheter une maison? Est-ce que c'est plus cher ou moins cher de faire l'épicerie? Et la réponse est claire. C'est plus cher que jamais. C'est plus difficile. La vie est pire que dans le passé. Donc, les libéraux ont eu 9 ans pour faire les choses différemment, mais ils n'ont pas réussi. Donc, les gens me disent qu'ils ne vont pas donner une autre occasion aux libéraux. Donc, on va avoir un choix entre les conservateurs qui coupent, et ça va vous coûter cher, Pierre Poilievre qui va vous coûter trop cher, ou l'NPD qui vont réduire vos factures, qui vont économiser votre argent, qui va renforcer nos institutions publiques et nos services publics.
OK. Et pour faire un suivi à la question en anglais là, de mon collègue David Baxter, j'ai pas bien compris votre réponse. On dirait que vous n'avez pas vraiment répondu clairement. Est-ce que vous êtes en faveur ou en défaveur d'un pipeline Est-Ouest qui transporte du pétrole? Est-ce que vous êtes en faveur ou non?
On favorise un projet de créer une électrification Est-Ouest. Ça, c'est ma priorité. Pour des autres projets, on a des critères qui doivent être établis pour aller de l'avant. Donc, les critères qu'on a, c'est un projet qui a l'acceptabilité sociale, un projet qui crée des bons emplois pour les travailleurs, un projet qui suit nos buts environnementaux et un projet où on travaille ensemble avec les communautés autochtones. Donc, pour moi, je favorise un programme d'électrification Est-Ouest pour connecter l'énergie qui est abordable, qui est tellement pas chère et qui est une énergie qui est propre pour créer un climat, pour produire plus de choses au Canada, pour encourager les industries au Canada. Si on a de l'énergie qui est moins chère, ça encourage les industries au Canada. Donc, ça, c'est ma priorité. Et comme j'ai dit, je suis ouvert au projet qui suit nos critères.
We will now go to Mackenzie Gray with Global. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh. You've talked extensively about how there'll be, in your estimation, an election in March, yet you guys have only roughly 140 candidates nominated so far. What's taking so long for the NDP to get a full slate of candidates in place?
We'll be ready, election ready when the election comes. We're well on track to achieve that. We have hit all of our targets, and we'll be ready for an election. And that election is going to be important for folks out there. You're seeing what we're focused on. We want workers first. We want to support you and your family. The Conservatives want to cut, and it's going to cost you. And the Liberals let you down. And people tell me they don't want to give them another shot. It's an important election. We'll be ready to fight it.
Provincially, we've seen an NDP candidate drop out and say, back the Liberal candidate. They're the best person to be able to beat the Conservatives in our riding. At a federal level, I'm sure there's many progressives who would like the idea of voting for you, but they look at the polls and see that the Liberals are pulling ahead. Will you commit to running a full slate of candidates across the country and run against the Liberals in every riding?
Yes, we'll have a full slate of candidates. And I can tell you, I've been in government, in elected official, in some of the most difficult times. And during the pandemic, when there was just 25 of us, we were able to fight for the things that Canadians needed. If we were not there, if New Democrats were not there, people weren't going to get the help that they needed. And now in this last minority government, everything that we were able to get done that made people's lives better, protections for workers, funding for pharmacare, dental care for seniors, only happened because of New Democrats. We have seen that governments do not act and can't get things done unless more New Democrats are elected. Elect more of us, and more will be done for working people. Today, we talked about a plan to put workers first, to build Canadian infrastructure using Canadian steel. That's what you get with that's what you get with New Democrats in power. So I encourage you all, if you want someone that's going to fight for you, that's going to stand up for you, elect a New Democrat in your riding.
We will now go to Olivia Stefanovic with CBC News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Singh. Should U.S. President Donald Trump be allowed to come to the G7 in Canada while he's insulting Canada and making threats against it?
Well, I think it's an important question. This is someone that's threatened our country and has threatened our very sovereignty. What I'm really concerned about is the fact that we've got a candidate who's running for prime minister who is endorsed by Elon Musk, someone that's a part of the administration that has threatened our country, threatened our jobs, and Pierre Poilievre accepted that endorsement. That shows you where he stands. He accepted the endorsement of someone who's a part of an administration that wants to take over our country. It shows you that he is not fit to be prime minister, and it shows you that he doesn't put Canada first. I've said very clearly, let's attack directly Elon Musk by putting 100% retaliatory tariffs on Tesla products. Let's make them feel the economic pain. They want to take shots at us. We're ready to fight back. That's where I stand. I want to stand up for Canada, fight back for Canada. We're not seeing that from Pierre Poilievre, and that shows you where he stands.
And given the expectations of Canada's allies and how defense spending is tied to trade, what is your plan to meet the NATO 2% target? Can you give us a specific year in which the NDP would reach NATO's defense spending target by?
I appreciate the question. You'll understand that we'll roll out the details of our spending, the details of our plan closer to the election, but I can tell you our values on this. I've said very clearly that the men and women who serve in our country are serving and doing the work that we ask of them with equipment that frankly should be in a museum. They're using outdated equipment that is not up to par. And so we absolutely need to invest in giving the men and women who serve the equipment they need to do the work we ask of them. So that's going to be an investment that we are prepared to make, the right equipment to do the work we ask of them. We also know that the men and women who serve often cannot find housing in the communities where they're posted. And so we've committed to building housing on base for Canadian Armed Forces so they can live on base in affordable homes. So that's another expenditure that we're prepared to make. These are both significant expenditures, but necessary. We are in a time right now in a world that is more dangerous than before, more uncertain than before. And we need to make sure that we are doing what we can to protect our country and to support those that serve for our country.
We have one last question with Mark Ramsey from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thank you for taking our questions. Your party has said that it expects Mark Carney to win the Liberal leadership race. Several polls have showed that if Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership race, the Liberals would trend a bit higher with voters and they take away support from the NDP. Why do you think progressive voters are looking at Mark Carney as the alternative to Pierre Poilievre and not you?
Well, we've seen this before. Any leadership race, there's a bump for the party, particularly when the leadership race involves determining who the current prime minister will be. So of course that's going to happen. But there'll be an important election. Campaigns matter. And we're going to put the choice to Canadians. They're going to have an important choice to make. I've asked Canadians this question, and I encourage folks to make this reflection themselves. Is your life better or worse after 9 years of Liberals being in power? Is it more expensive or less expensive to buy a home? How about grocery prices? Have they gone up or gone down? On each of these points, Canadians' lives are worse after 9 years of Liberals. So Canadians have told me they feel really let down, and they're not going to give them another chance. So this next election is a choice between Conservatives with Pierre Poilievre, who want to cut the things you need, and it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you dearly. Or New Democrats who want to invest in what you need, invest in our healthcare, invest in pensions, and lower your bills by taking out corporate greed and lowering the cost of groceries, lowering the cost of homes, building the homes you can afford. That's the choice in this next election, and I'm going to be ready to fight that election and give that choice to Canadians.
Thank you. And on another note, the federal government's assault weapons buyback program, the first phase of it started in December. The second phase for individuals still hasn't started yet. And as we get to an election, it might not come into place. If you're elected prime minister, would you continue this program?
Yeah, we want to keep our communities safe, and we want policies that keep our communities safe. So this is something that we've supported. We've been concerned that the Liberals have said one thing and done another. They've not followed through on their proposal. We would make sure that we keep our community safe. Thanks so much.
This concludes
Thanks
our
all.
press conference. Ceci conclut notre conférence de presse. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.